Hello, everybody. Here I am again. And this time I want to talk to you about how to create an outline. If you've arrived at this step and you are all done with your gathering grid and you have all of your information like this student does here, I went ahead and grabbed this out of fifth period. It's looking pretty good. And so I'm going to use this as my example to kind of walk you through what next steps are. So also in Classroom, I'm going to post this for you, and this is a how-to on how to construct an outline, and it kind of walks you through some of the steps that you might want to be aware of. And so I'm just going to walk you through really quickly though, and then you can take your time going through it later on if you want. So why bother? We all know why bother. It's so that you can organize your thinking and make sure that your information is being used in a great way. General layout of an outline. This is what it winds up looking like with your Roman numerals to start, your capital letters, your Arabic numerals, and so on. Okay? We're also going to have a title and thesis at the top, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. And then we have the process of construction. Now this is super important. I used to make the mistake of thinking that the thesis came first. No, the last step is constructing your thesis based on how you decide to group your information and what information you decide to use. So, first thing you want to do is examine your information. What does it seem to suggest? So you're going to take a look through and kind of comb back through. So if I'm looking at this one, this student decided to do Dwight Eisenhower for her project. And so she's got all of this information that she gathered from this first source from a database. And then here is one from history.com that she has some information. And then here's another one from history.com. Here's from whitehouse.gov. Well, she doesn't have two databases, but we're going to use it anyway. And she's got some really good information in here. And so what I would want to do is either color code the different notes over here and say, okay, this relates to something else I see in here and go about it that way. Or I could just have a sheet of paper out off to the side, which is what I decided to do as I was combing through this student's information. And so that would be your first step. The next step would be, what connections can you make between these bits of information? What are some of the ways you can group it together? Again, for this student's information, some of the ways in which I saw that I could group it is, one thing I could do is I could talk about his early life. So when he was first getting started, maybe with his career. And then I could talk about the middle part of his life, where maybe he's now a powerful general and that kind of stuff. And then I could do later life, which is when he became a US president, which I think she mentions down in here somewhere. Oh, where is it? I forget. It's in here somewhere. Oh, here it is. Eisenhower, age 70, was the oldest president in U.S. history when he left office in the winter of 1961. Okay, so that's one way I could choose to group it. Another way I was thinking of is I could do it by the types of jobs that he had. So I could go with, okay, so first he was first he was a military leader and he became a general. Then he was the supreme commander of NATO. And then he was actually that's out of order. First he was president of Columbia University, I believe, and then he was the supreme commander of NATO. And then he was the president of the United States. So you'd notice there that I have 4 ways in which I've decided to group this information if I go that route. Now my third option is if I want to group it based on the types of character traits or characteristics that I see of Eisenhower based on this information. And some of my ideas for groupings might be, okay, first off, he was skillful or quick-witted or decisive or something like that. The second thing is that he was a planner for sure, and he liked to plan out different ideas. The third idea might be that he was highly respected, and so he climbed in the ranks. And the fourth idea might be that he was successful because he was a calculated risk taker. All right, so then I just have to decide which way am I going to go with my groupings. What am I going to decide to do? And so, remember my first option is I have, and if I want to do an outline from scratch, I can go over here in Docs, and I can choose this tab right here, and it'll automatically help me to format this stuff. So first off, we have early life, and then I have middle life, and then I have late. That's one option. Okay. Another option that I can go with is I can do military leader / general later on. And then I can say president of Columbia University. And then I can say supreme commander of NATO. Excuse me. Whoops. And then I could say president of the US. All right, that's another way that I could go about it. Or my last option is that he was quick-witted or decisive, that he was a planner, so he was, you know, making sure that everything was done just so, that he was highly respected, and I could also say that he was patient, if I wanted to. Okay, there are other things that I might see in there that I might decide, oh, okay, this is more of a trait that I'd rather focus on, but I'm just doing a quick run through for you guys just so you can see. Alrighty. So anyway, back to this. Then I'm going to decide on which way of grouping I want to go with, and then decide what information I'm going to put underneath it is the next step down here, after I've assigned Roman numerals, all that stuff. Okay, so I skipped ahead a little bit. Now also you have to decide what order you want to put your groupings in. If I'm going to do the early life, middle life, late life, then clearly that is chronologically. If I want to go in order by the types of jobs he had, also that would be chronologically. Most of us will probably wind up going with this sort of an outline, considering that we're doing a major historical event of some sort or person. You could do process if you're describing how to do something. Like maybe if you had D-Day or something like that, and that's the one you're choosing, maybe it would go with process. Cause and effect, maybe if you're talking about the final solution and the effect that it had on the Jewish people or something like that. Deductive logic is where you're starting broad and you're narrowing down to some kind of a conclusion, and inductive is just the opposite, where you're starting narrow and then you're broadening it out. Okay? So anyway, whoops, you assign a Roman numeral to each group, just like I did here. Okay? And then you're going to decide what information will best go underneath each group. So if I'm going back into this student's example again, I'm going to say, okay, well, based on what grouping I'm going with, maybe I would go with the jobs, right? Then I would say, okay, well, this would clearly go under president. And then this also would go under president, okay? As would this. All of these, in fact, all the information coming from this source is talking about him as president, I suppose, okay? And so on. So then I would continue to go through and group my information and put it underneath those different groupings or Roman numerals that I've designated, like so, okay? Now you do not necessarily need to include any analysis in an outline. That's not really what it's about. But you will probably wind up like this, where you have your title. Okay, give it a title, something other than World War II outline. All right, be kind of creative with that, please. And then your thesis statement, which is what you will construct last, will go here. Roman numerals, you plug those in here. Then you would have some ideas that descend underneath. Like, let's say if I wanted to go a different route with this outline, and maybe I wanted to do, okay, who Eisenhower was on the job, and the types of jobs he had. And then if I want to describe his personal life, and then if I want to describe his major accomplishments, and then if I want to say what his lasting legacy is or something like that, his impact on the American people. Now again, it's going to be dictated by the information that I found. So if I found a lot of really good information, then I'll be able to put it in underneath these things. So if I do on the job, my next thing might be then that I would have military leader, and I might have president of Columbia University, and then might have supreme commander of NATO, and then finally I would have President of the United States. Okay, and so on. And then underneath here is where I may want to say a couple of things about this. So first, he was maybe a colonel. Okay, then maybe he was a general, and so on. Okay, and then from there, I'm going to say, okay, what information can I put underneath here to really explain how he was a colonel? Like, what did I find in here that kind of tells me something about that? All right, so I'm going to take the information then from here. Now, if this information needs to be quoted, please make sure to do so, okay? If any of this information in here is quoted, then she would have wanted to throw quotation marks around it right in here in her grid. And then also, of course, that would translate over to here where you would have your quotation marks and then you'd have your information, blah, blah, okay? Also, you're going to include an in-text citation. So, based on the student's sources, she would go ahead and say, okay, what's the last name of the author, or what's the first couple of words of the title of the article if there is no author. So let's imagine the author's last name is Smith, just for the sake of being easy here. All right, there's my in-text citation for that bit of information. And then here's another bit of information that maybe I've paraphrased, blah, 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 blah. And maybe this came from a different source that is written by a guy named Jones. And then maybe I have another bit of information that, again, I'm just going to paraphrase. And for this one, I don't actually have an author's last name. I just have a title. So I'm going to drop the quotation marks around it, and maybe it was just called Eisenhower, the man, or something like that, okay? Eisenhower. I might put that in there. Or I might put in, if the title was Great Military Leaders of the source that I was using, it would be something like that. Okay, just to give you an idea as to what that would look like. So generally speaking, your quoted information is going to be at this level. And this indicates parallelism, by the way, because this is all the same type of information at this level. This would all be coming from my sources. If you notice for 1 and 2, they also kind of match. They're the same type of information. A and B are the same type of information. So that is parallelism, folks. Fun fact for you. Not that you wanted to know that. And this presentation does go over that in more detail in terms of parallelism, coordination, subordination. You can have some fun reading that if you want to. Division. If there's a 1, there should be a 2. If there's an A, there should be a B, and so on. We are writing full sentence outlines here, though, folks. So already I've made a little boo-boo. So I want to make sure that I write out that Eisenhower was a colonel in blah, 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 wherever, okay? And then I would have my information falling in underneath that. So you want to make sure that you are using full sentences whenever possible, because that helps to explain where you were going with it. And this is going to be alphanumeric. We already know that based on my example. How your outline should look, I've showed you an example already and talked to you about your title a little bit. And then how your outline can be organized and some important tips. This is key, okay? Using in-text citations is absolutely essential. Important tips, double space, just like you would with an MLA research paper. And you will have a header and heading. If you notice, I have an outline planner here that I will plug into Classroom as well, so you guys can go ahead and use this as a guide, or you can actually type into it if you wish. But this is for name, class, and date up here, title, thesis, and then you get going. Now also, don't think of it as though, oh, I've got to have 3 Roman numerals. Not necessarily. You might have 2 Roman numerals. You might have 4 Roman numerals. It just depends on your information. If you notice in my example, I have 4, all right? So it just kind of depends. And then, how does the outline translate into a research paper? If we were writing a research paper, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer, okay? A Roman numeral does not necessarily mean a paragraph, just FYI. All right? And there's another little piece of information for you. Anywho, that is it for how to construct your outline. I hope that helps you. And yeah, good luck.